What's up, Outliers? Welcome to another breakdown of an athlete. Today, we're going to look a little bit into Eli Tomac, but more so than anything, we're going to look into the benefits of training at high altitudes and living at high altitudes. And Eli Tomac is a really good example of that, as he grew up in Cortez, Colorado, which is roughly 6,100 feet above sea level. So mile high, as I said, pretty, intense to be up at that high of altitude if you're not used to it. So I want to kind of cover a little bit of, the things that some people will experience at those high altitudes first. So first things first, Jason Anderson comes to mind a few years back at Thunder Valley in Colorado. Just couldn't do it, was feeling sick. And due to that altitude sickness, essentially like a mild case of hypoxia, which is not enough oxygen, is occurring. And, the ways that you can improve that is by experiencing that stress of high altitude a little bit more. So Jason went out and purchased land in New Mexico at a high altitude to go get that. Yet he still kind of went and did more training like at Club MX later in the summer. But he was able to go race just fine at higher altitudes after adapting. So it's really just about adaptations in the body at the end of the day to help it become more efficient at whatever the task is. It could be, freaking running. Like if you run more, you become better. If you expose yourself to heat more, you become better at adapting to the heat or the cold or whatever it is. You just need to do the thing to get better at the thing. Go figure. So Eli Tomac, though, this is something that has been talked about so damn much on, the broadcast and stuff. It's mile high, lives at a mile high, benefits of living there, all that stuff, which huge benefits. It's awesome. There's a reason why most of the Olympic teams train at high altitudes in Colorado as well, or Utah, because there is 100% performance benefits in being up high. Now, I live in Bend, Oregon. Bend, Oregon is roughly 3,800 to 4,000, depending where you are in town. And it's funny because when I first moved here, I actually experienced some discomfort with my workouts. Not like living or sleeping or anything. It's not high enough because typically extreme altitude sickness is going to happen 8,000 feet and higher. But I was having a little bit of a tough time, with my running workouts. Lifting was fine. It wasn't a big deal. My running workouts, though, were much more challenging, and I was having a hard time catching my breath, and also just feeling lower on energy, which makes a lot of sense. So took a little while, a couple of weeks to start adapting, and since then have had major adaptations that have occurred that can be shown through things like blood testing, but also just overall feeling, and also through things like my data tracking ring that is going to tell me my oxygen levels in my blood and stuff. So those things improved, and it just took a little bit of time for that to happen. Now, when I do go down to sea level, say if I was going to go up to Washougal, Washington and go race or ride, feel pretty good. My endurance up here at high altitude is really good. So if I go down to sea level where oxygen is more dense, feels pretty darn good. There is a little bit of a caveat to that because we have really low humidity here. So there's not a lot of moisture in the air. So when you go to more humid places, even if they are at sea level, they can be more challenging to breathe because of the humidity that comes with that. But with that being said, it's still a major benefit, and humidity just makes things harder. Speaking of training benefits, I want to take a second to talk about this video's sponsor today, which is Bliss CBD. Bliss CBD makes awesome CBD beverages and sparkling water. They make tinctures, muscle rubs, can bring you great benefits like anti-inflammatory properties and also relaxation, which honestly is so important for recovery, especially if you're training hard or you're traveling for competition or just living life in general. Stress tends to consume us. So CBD can be a really helpful hand at helping reducing stress and improving sleep. Now, CBD is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid. Don't get it confused with the other one. So this is definitely not going to cause any major issues on that end, but it is a great thing to have in your regimen for recovery, and I couldn't recommend it more. Check out the link below and use code OutlierAthlete for 15% off all products. But overall, training at a high altitude, high elevation, always get those mixed up. Altitude, elevation. I don't know. I'm probably going to be saying them wrong one way or another, but lots of benefits to being up high away from sea level. So let's get into some of those benefits. So the first benefit is erythropoietin, which is the EPO. People hear about EPO. We look back to like Lance Armstrong and his, Tour de France days and stuff like that. And that was something that he was using was EPO, which if we're living at high altitudes, that's going to be stimulated through the hypoxia or the lack of oxygen. Comes from the kidneys naturally getting it. It's come from the kidneys, but you can do other things with it. And so pretty much EPO is the hormone that tells bone marrow to produce red blood cells. So fun fact, your red blood cells come from your bone marrow. Pretty important. Essentially, with more red blood cells, we have higher amounts of hematocrit in the blood, which is another fancy word for just saying that there's more there. It's a denser capacity of things that allow oxygen to attach to them and circulate through your body, which go figure if you have oxygen going in your nasal, mouth, whatever, into your lungs, circulating your blood, going to the cells and powering things like mitochondria, which then produce ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and helping basically create energy. So pretty darn important. If you have more of it, it works better. It's no different like in engines or anything. This is kind of physics, right? So the better your air intake is on an engine, the more efficient it's going to be. Yes, there is a need for more fuel in ratio to that oxygen, but that's the same thing at the mitochondrial level. There needs to be a fuel, typically coming from either fat or carbohydrate, that is also mixing with the oxygen and then creating a combustion, so to say, in the body. And there's byproduct. Our byproduct we breathe out in forms of CO2. So that carbon is a huge byproduct. And also hydrogen is another one, which then comes out as vapor, water, H2O. So it's really just kind of physics at the end of the day with the body and the engine and stuff like that. So it's no different if you're living at a high altitude. You're going to basically increase your body's ability to intake oxygen and utilize it for fuel systems. So when you do that at high altitude, it's not going to be too much different. Like if you're, say, living at 6,000 feet and you're competing at 6,000 feet, you're definitely going to have a big advantage over like somebody that lives at like sea level in California or Florida or whatever, and then going up high. But your biggest advantage is going to be coming when you actually go back down to sea level. So an old saying is live high, train low. Because you have this balance of I get to live at high altitude and then I get to go down to lower altitudes and train and make it easier on myself when I train really hard, and then come back up, live at the high altitude for that long duration. Because usually training is like an hour, 2 hours, right? But if you're living the rest of your 22 hours of your day up at high altitude, you're going to basically make those adaptations occur. It does take time. So 3-4 weeks in time for that to happen. It's not going to be like one day, like if you just are traveling up into Salt Lake City and, having a layover or something, like that adaptation is not going to occur. It takes time, about a month. So with Eli Tomac growing up at these high altitudes and living up there, riding up there, training out there most of his life, at least until recently, where some of his training takes place down in Florida or somewhere in the Southeast, wherever Star is, Georgia. And doing all that stuff down there, he's mostly still living at the high altitude in Cortez, but he's able to go do his training for, the couple weeks, the testing and stuff, and then goes back up and does a lot more training still up at his place, from what it seems. Tomacs are fairly secretive about their training methods and stuff like that, but that is one thing that I think is really important. His father, John Tomac, former world champion mountain biker and stuff like that. I think it shows that there's a lot of benefit to that, and it's not new knowledge that that's beneficial. It's just kind of hard as a professional athlete in the right setting to go live in these places. And it's obviously been such a non-negotiable for him in his career to stay up in Colorado and make sure that the majority of his training happens up there and the majority of his living happens up there, so that he can keep those, good adaptations and higher levels of the EPO in his system, so that when he does go train at lower altitudes, elevation, he is able to recover quicker, a better endurance. And I think that kind of shows. If we look at Eli Tomac throughout his career, he's just a dog and can ride the piss out of anything. So he definitely, has worked really hard. There's nothing to take away from that. But when you work really hard at a high altitude, you're going to gain more benefit. Your hemoglobin's going to go up a couple points, which is a huge deal. A couple points is a really big deal. You're going to basically just increase your body's overall efficiency, especially when you go back down to that sea level. So I think that's kind of like the biggest piece when looking at Eli Tomac, because I did the Chase Sexton, all the different stuff he was doing in Peter Park. And that training's super important. Strength training, the endurance and all that stuff, super important. And I'm sure Eli has a component of that in his training regimen where he's doing, mountain biking, cycling, weightlifting, all these sort of things, because super important still. But I sit here and ponder what those things might be. I have no idea exactly, but I do know that there is a huge benefit of what he does just from a place of living at high altitude. So I thought that'd be kind of a cool little thing to touch on, because people look at, ways to get better and ways to train. Now I'm here to tell you, if you live at a lower altitude and you don't have access to go live at 6,000 feet, that's just a reality for a lot of people. So if you want to increase these numbers, there's certain things that have the potential to help increase them. Mouth taping when you sleep is a huge one. It's been shown, working with the functional med doctor I work with, he's had athletes start the mouth taping for sleep. Sounds pretty intimidating, but that's something that has shown to increase the hemoglobin levels. Pretty big deal. Some EPO levels, and all you're doing is covering your mouth when you sleep. Now that makes you more efficient at nasal breathing, which is also super important. So you can work on those two things if you live at a lower altitude and, maybe get a couple points jump. It's going to help you in that way, but it's also going to help you in a lot of other health beneficial ways, which I think I'm probably going to do like a performance bite on that, because, there's a lot to go in there. But some breath work also can play into it, because to basically elicit these adaptations, we need to do breathing things that function with the breath, things that essentially mimic or interact with our hormones, especially like the EPO hormone that's coming from the kidney. So you have to work this with oxygen intake and CO2 outtake. Other than that, I'm not going to promote any bad ways of doing EPO to get into your system. I'm not even familiar with how you would actually do it. I know there's a way to do it, and I don't know how. That's probably a good thing as a coach. I don't know how to cheat my way into that, but I do know these little tricks to help people that aren't living at these higher elevations to at least get some of the benefits. So give a couple of these things a try, and even just doing like longer duration, low intensity cardiovascular, where it can mimic the adaptation of like capillary density of which you get living at high elevation as well. So there's ways of doing it. Obviously it's just easier when you can just live at a high elevation. But if you're training low and you want training and living low and you want some of the benefits of being high, mouth taping, low intensity cardio, those are a couple of things that you can do. So it's not out of the question, but there's definitely a benefit to the athletes that do have the convenience of living and training up high and going and doing competitions low and stuff like that. So it's kind of what Tomac has going for him. So as I said, a little bit different approach than the video like with Chase Sexton, where we're able to look at like the exercises he's doing. But I still think this is a really important component of the training that Tomac does and the benefit that he has. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe, shoot a comment down below. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.